Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for joining us. And I know this event is being live streamed as well. And so we have a wider audience as well. But it's a very intimate setting. And I have to say, I think this is perhaps one of the most important conversations that has been had, that hasn't been had, and needs to be had globally as well. We've spent far too much time, and I should say, as a representative of CNBC, I've been at the last two huge COPs, the COP21 in Le Bourget, Paris, and the COP26 in Glasgow late last year as well. And I think finally people are beginning to realize that if we are going to move to sustainability, we are going to improve the state of our planet, then we can't just concentrate on energy, on industry. We have to think about food systems, and food systems cover not only, of course, agriculture. It is how we transport that food, how we consume that food, how we process that food as well. It is all consuming as well, if you'd excuse that pun. And the fact of the matter is as well, the current crisis has really heightened a lot of the attention to food and food systems as well. But I've got to say, I think the need for change is way bigger than the current crisis in Ukraine. We will touch upon that, but that is not our main emphasis today. What we are touching on is the relationship between the planet and agriculture and how we can avoid some of the worst crises there. We have an amazing panel, actually. Unfortunately, one of our panelists who would have made it even more amazing is stuck on a train. But my goodness me, we have representatives from the farming community, from the UNCCD, and indeed from the, perhaps I think, the most important private company on the planet as well. Let me just give you a couple of the facts as well again, and I don't want to take Ibrahim's thunder here as well, but I spent a lot of time reading his reports, and I don't know if you have or have not, ladies and gentlemen, but you do need to know some of the facts that are coming out from the UNCCD, because they are alarming but not alarmist. They give us a roadmap as well. So they say that the crisis is there, but they also tell us that there is a roadmap. Things are not lost or forlorn. 70% of the world's agricultural land is controlled by just 1% of farms, large agribusiness. Now, I'm not here to beat up on large agribusiness. I am here to inquire of Cargill's, for instance, about how they are leading initiatives as well. But business as usual for agriculture cannot be the case as well. Food systems account for 80% of deforestation that we've seen so far, 29% of greenhouse gases. And in terms of land degradation, the statistics are quite alarming. Again, I won't take Ibrahim's thunder on this one as well. So let's just go through and just work out what the crisis is, where we see the greatest tension points. We can feed into the Ukraine conversation as well. But again, as I say, that is not our major emphasis today as well. And then we'll just work out, and in a very positive manner, very collegiate manner as well. We're not here to blame anyone. We're not here to point fingers. But what can be done from here going forward? I've already referenced him twice. Ibrahim Thiaw is the Under-Secretary General of the United Nations, Executive Secretary of the UN Convention for Combat Desertification, UNCCD. Please read their reports if you haven't. I'd imagine because you're an interested audience, a lot of you have read the reports. It is sobering stuff. Erin Fitzgerald, who I've only just met, but I've been reading in voraciously about as well, is the CEO of US Farmers and Ranchers in Action USA. And I'll make the point now. Erin will make the point. I'm sure Dave will as well. Farmers, large and small, developed nations and emerging nations, all need to be at the table. Who's fed up with top-down initiatives that don't consult the farmers, that don't consult the people who actually produce the food? I, for one, am as well. Dave McClellan is chair of the board and CEO of Cargill's as well, Minneapolis-based as well. I think he's, and again, Dave, I do, and I'm not just saying this because you're here, I think you're one of the most important CEOs on the planet for the client. I think the responsibility on you is absolutely enormous, and I don't wish to make it heavier on your shoulders, but I really do. I think companies like Cargill's are titanic in their size and titanic in their influence. Ibrahim, I'm going to start off with you if I can as well. I've mentioned a couple of statistics from your reports as well, but why don't you just talk to us about what is going on at the moment, what are your greatest concerns, and a little bit about the roadmap that you believe could be successful in transforming this planet and transforming agriculture and our relationship with food.
Thank you very much. The report that you are referring to is called the Global Land Outlook, for those of you who want to read it. It says that land degradation is affecting now 40% of the land surface. All ice-free emerging land, 40% is already degraded. half of humanity is affected by that. So it is not one country, one region, it is half of humanity. 3.2 billion people are affected by land degradation. Now, this is happening while we are having a growing middle class and a growing population in the world. So in a way, we have a higher demand and less resources. And where is this going to take us by 2050, when we will have most likely 9 billion people on Earth? And some statistics are saying that we need to maybe have 50% more food on the tables. So this is really what the situation is. It's all about our well-being as humanity, the amount of water that we need, the amount of forest that we are going to degrade in order to feed a growing population. Now, if you put this into perspectives, if you degrade land, what you do is actually to degrade your economy, because 50% of the GDP is at risk if we continue with this path. Now, the report that you are referring to is also making some concrete suggestions so that it is not only the challenges that have been identified, but actually solutions are already provided. And the solutions are there. Farmers from around the world know the technologies. 100 examples and case studies have been compiled in this report that show that there is action on the ground. It needs to be scaled up. Now, the report says that if you restore 1 billion hectares, that's the size of the United States of America, by 2030, you can actually continue to feed the world in a decent way. You will need $1.2 trillion to do that. But the report is not requesting taxpayers to pay more. The report is proposing that we actually take this money, 22% of harmful subsidies can be repurposed in order to finance that. What does it mean? Put money on your farmers. Give them positive money that can produce more, generate more, save the planet. You feed the population without degrading your natural capital. Because these harmful subsidies, they are driving biodiversity loss and climate change, and they are reducing the resilience of our ecosystems. So this is not the way to go. The way to go is to use that taxpayers' money in order to produce good, in order to have a more sustainable planet, and also to put that money on your farmers, on land restoration, in order to conserve the planet and the future of Earth.
Ibrahim, lots of questions. Tanya's already asked me not to jump in with a supplementary question straight away, so I'll just hold that just for now as well. But Erin as well, I mean, it's music to your ears, I'd imagine, what Ibrahim just said as well. Redirect the capital and talk to the farmers and work with the farmers.
Yeah, I was really pleased to hear this, because I'm grateful that the World Economic Forum for the first time is putting agriculture and 100 million farmers at the front and center of this conversation, particularly at this moment in time, as a halfway 6-month point between COP as we go to Egypt. We cannot be showing up into Egypt talking about climate change without including the very people, our farmers, in this conversation. And I would say this is no longer business as usual for our farmers and ranchers all around the world. In the United States, they are now in springtime, and they're planting for this harvest and the next 30. Many of our farmers have been faced, even just 2 weeks ago, with the derecho. 8 out of the last 10 harvest seasons have been faced with extreme and episodic events. I want us to just remove the word for a minute of farmers and maybe think of these people as an eco-workforce. They have boots on the ground, they have every bit of capability, but they're going to be battling the real effects of disrupted markets and climate change, but they also have unbelievable talent. I would like to just give you an example, because it's 70 degrees and fluorescent in this room, but really out on our farm, our farmers are really doing amazing work as climate eco-warriors. Marilyn Hershey, dairy farmer, my chair, she's in Pennsylvania. She realized that, hey, food waste is a problem. So she took food waste, went to her local community, took food waste and combined it with manure. And that is now generating renewable energy for the local community and her farm, and also creating fertilizer. Totally innovative. Another farmer, Ben, from Iowa, just after COVID, right when COVID was hitting, we saw the food system bend but not break. Everyone in the food and ag sector, we all came together like never before 2 months later, an inland hurricane hit him, called a derecho, wiped out 8 to 10% of the corn crop as we know it. And Ben said, hey, I lost everything. At this point, let me go in and try to do cover cropping. He got the best seed mix with the best agronomists, but it created a flurry and then clogged up his drainage and tiling. Then what turned into a multi-million-dollar mistake. Now, he did the right thing. Maryland's doing the right thing. Many of our farmers are trying to do the right thing. But are we, as economic and business agents of change here at Davos, really creating the finance models to de-risk their investment and let them plant the future and be the eco-warriors that they can be in the fight on climate change?
That is sobering. And it's right from the grassroots, the pain and the struggles of farmers, and we know how hard they work and how backbreaking it is, and to lose 8 out of the 10 harvests would be affected. It's just hard stuff. David, I said to you, I think you are a stunningly important gentleman here. Do you wear that heavily on your shoulders? Do you realise how important it is for Cargill's to use its power? I'm sure you do.
I don't like the word. I'm not going to use the word you just said that started with a P. I don't look at it that way. I look at it as we have a role to play. We have a responsibility. We've been in business for 157 years. And the conditions that we're facing now, the environment, inflation, you know, what's going on with sustainability, and then, of course, Ukraine, have all led to this imperfect storm. And you mentioned it in your opening, Steve, which is the good news is I think that people are appreciating more and more the importance of the ag supply chain and system. And we saw and are seeing the importance of the farmer and being at the front of it. And both Aaron and Ishmael said it. I have been attending Davos for many years, and I think never before, and I hope those of you in the audience that have been here before would agree. I think never before has there been as great an appreciation of the importance of the farmer in the food supply chain. But I think we put it in our statement of purpose, to nourish the world in a safe, responsible, and sustainable way. And so I just consider myself, somebody who has an incredible responsibility, but an incredible honor. Yeah. Our company has the privilege of bringing food from where it's produced to where it's needed, and I wear that honor with pride. Yeah. And so I don't think of it as, using size. I think size is good. It allows us to reinvent and to recreate supply chains where they've been disrupted by weather or by COVID or by war. And so it's an awesome responsibility, but it's a privilege.
And I get that, and I'll come back to you now. We've had one go through, but the fact of the matter is, if a farmer tries to do something different on a single initiative, again, trying to use the food waste to support their farming effort, that is one thing. That is an individual effort. If Cargill's makes one change to its business practice, to how it transports, to how it processes, to how it deals with farmers, yep, the ramifications, the ripples are absolutely enormous.
Well, it's an enormous industry, meaning the production of agriculture and the production of food. And so we take that responsibility, the responsibility of feeding the world and our customers, which are our farmers, our partners, very seriously. So we recognize that we can have a positive influence if we are working with farmers in Cote d'Ivoire, in Indonesia, in South America, or North America, in terms of whether it's training on regenerative ag practices. And you mentioned it, Steve, in your intro. And I said this in one of the groups that I was in recently. I've never heard the words regenerative agriculture uttered or spoken until this year. And so I was here in 20. I mean, I'm sure it was spoken somewhere. I probably wasn't in the room, but every session I've been to is talking about regenerative agriculture. And that's one of the areas that we're focusing on because, to your point, if we can use our connections and our partnerships with our farmer customers, our farmer partners, about enhancing regenerative ag, that's going to make a positive difference.
Yeah. Look, I want to reiterate my point. Categorically, this isn't about beating up on big ag. This is about working with big ag. I'm not that person. Get another presenter if that's what you want. But Ibrahim, just explain to us the difference between what small farmers are doing and what you think they can do compared with big ag. And actually, if there is something that the small farmers are doing, is there something that the big farmers can learn from that, the big producers? Because your report makes some very specific, or the report I mentioned makes some very specific mentions of what the small-scale farmers are doing compared to big agriculture.
Small farmers are more agile. And we are in a moment where we need to shift. We need to rethink the way we produce and the way we consume as well. Maybe we'll come to consumption at a later stage. But we need to rethink the way we produce. And it is much easier for a small farmer to actually shift if they are provided with the incentives and the right policies. So it is very important that governments know that their decisions are having impacts on 500 million farmers that are producing for themselves and for the rest of the world. Small farmers are also in that situation where they are not getting much subsidies. Much of the subsidies are going to large corporations because they are larger, which is normal. So what we are proposing is to really pay more attention to these small farmers. First of all, they feed families directly. Secondly, they are found in some places where poverty is large. So it is very important that we actually consider that concept of leaving no one behind, and that monies are going to them, not only staying in big corporations or in big companies or at the center with governments. We also know that they are more vulnerable most of the time when there is a disaster like drought. They are, you see what is happening in Eastern Africa right now. It's really, or in the Sahel, or what happened last year in Madagascar, or even in Spain this year. So droughts are hitting, and more disasters are hitting year after year because of climate change and other considerations, and they are more vulnerable. So it is very important that they get support from governments. And now, when there is a disaster in a country that is not economically strong, what happens is that they have no support, they have no aid. They depend on humanitarian aid. And thanks to the humanitarian agencies, we have less lives being claimed by disasters, but we have a huge impact on the economy, and it takes 5-7 years to recover, and by 5-7 years, you have another drought hitting. So it is really something that we should look at in a more cohesive way. Now, there is no question that big companies are there, and they are necessary, and they are absolutely useful because we need to feed the world. There is no question about that. The challenge that we are having, I think, with large corporations, and that is not necessarily from something that we should look on only from the corporations themselves, is to see the consumption side. When you say that 1/3 of the food produced is not eaten, sometimes it is not. There is nothing wrong with the food. It's just the size is not appropriate, or the shape. The carrot doesn't have the right shape, and the consumer doesn't like that. We have to really, as consumers, also pay attention to what we are doing, because we are throwing away food that is absolutely healthy, perfectly fine, just doesn't have the right shape, and is not straight, or is not 2 centimeters. The caliber that we are using, or the color, or the shape, or the way we are presenting them in our shelves. So I think we all, as consumers, we should pay attention to this, because that food that we are discarding is land, water, is carbon, and money.
Erin, you're nodding there. Do you want to come in on this?
I couldn't agree more. We always say that if we have 30 harvests left, right, then it's up to our responsibility to honor the harvest on our plates, right? So during COVID, there's 2 billion photos taken of our dinner plates because we came back to the sauce, a real Thanksgiving that was before us. Well, don't take too much. That's 10% of a food print. Don't waste it. That's another 30 to 40%. And then the other 50%, you have to count on our farmers to go get the job done, know where your food comes from. And that just reduces your footprint. But let's not forget our handprints that we have to have in our society. Even in the United States, 1 in 6 million Americans are food insecure. And around the world, we saw the bread lines go up. Footprints and handprints is the only sector that can go solve both.
Before I come to Dave on this, did you say we've got 30 harvests left?
With 30
because
harvests.
Of soil degradation, or?
So when you think about 2050, we have to get the climate down. But for our farmers, when they go out into the field, that means it's a chance. The level of innovation they have to get to each growing season is a monumental innovation challenge. It's a chance to get it right.
Okay, well, that's a different point from what I wanted to come to. But I hear what you're saying, and that's stunningly important. But do we have a soil degradation where you say about 30 harvests left? I've heard farmers saying I've got 50 harvests left, or I've got 70 harvests left in this land as well. I'm so pleased that at the World Economic Forum we're talking about soil degradation, because It's as important as hydrocarbons. I spend my life talking about hydrocarbons. I've been involved in hydrocarbons one way or other since 1988. Thank God we're talking about soil now as well. Dave, just tell people how important that is.
Oh boy, and again, Steve, it's like some of the other topics. We weren't talking about soil, 8-10 years ago when I first came here, but soil, and I think it's a good way to think about it. And Warren Buffett's son, Howard Buffett, wrote a book. I think it was called
40 Chances.
40 Chances. And it's a good way to think about it. You get one chance in a year, and it's impacted by climate change, by weather. It's the ultimate outdoor sport. And if you think about what a farmer goes through and with the elements, and then with the extremes that have come along from climate change, they are the custodians of the soil. But if you think about regenerative ag or soil as a carbon sink, it's a resource. I heard someone call it today, said think of it as an asset. Whether it's money or like your farm equipment, your soil is an asset which can sequester carbon and produce food. And we have to be more conscious about how do we protect it, how do we use it as an asset, think of it just like we think of a financial asset.
Yeah, I've put a lot of pressure on you by what I said earlier on as well. So what is Cargill doing to improve the soil?
Well, one of them is a focus on regenerative agriculture.
Yeah.
So we've got something called the Midwest Row Crop Collaborative, and we've also a program to commit 10,000 acres in the U.S. to regenerative agriculture, regenerative farming. So it's providing farmers the resources, the tools, the education, the money to adopt regenerative agriculture practices. Now, I think Aaron and Ishmael may be able to talk about the farming culture. It's not easy to transition. No. Not easy in many ways. Not easy technologically. I mean, you've got to rotate crops, and you've got to change crops and everything with no-till, low-till. But it's also, there's a cultural aspect to it. That the tradition of, hey, I've grown corn, my parents have grown corn on this land for decades, now I'm going to grow alfalfa or different crops because of regenerative ag. I also heard somebody say that, speaking of regenerative ag, we should pay a premium for regenerative agricultural practices to reward farmers for good behavior. And I thought, I don't think we should think about it that way. We should be thinking about rewarding consumers with choices in their food as to how it was produced and if it was produced sustainably. This isn't about putting the stick out against the farmer. It's about making consumers aware that there's different forms of farming that are responsible, ecologically responsible, that can enhance the value of the soil. And you should have the choice to be able to consume your food or make your purchasing decisions with that knowledge.
Yeah.
And we're in early days.
I just want to comment on what David was referring to as asset. That is absolutely the term to be used.
Yeah.
Some people call it natural capital, but it is really an asset. And the good example of that is Cote d'Ivoire, that I think you mentioned earlier on. I was in Cote d'Ivoire until this weekend. We had our COP there. And the government of Cote d'Ivoire, the president and the prime minister, who's probably here still, made a decision which, in my view, is historic. Cote d'Ivoire is known as cocoa production, or coffee and rubber and cashew nut. I mean, the main economy is based on agriculture. For 70 years now, they have built roads and country, and they are paying their midwives anywhere and doctors with land. Mm-hmm. Because it's agriculture, and that is absolutely the asset of theirs. Mm-hmm. And they realize that they have now destroyed up to 80, maybe 90% of their forests due to cocoa production, and because everybody has been grabbing land for more production. All of a sudden, they realize, okay, my God, where are we going in the next 50 years if we continue to degrade our soil and land, which is our asset? Are we going to still be the first producer of cocoa in the world, or are we going to lose that market? So what they have done now is to develop a program they call the Legacy Program of Cote d'Ivoire, thinking ahead the next 50 years, how can we produce more with less land loss and with more sustainable production of this, because there is no other choice. I mean, they cannot go to the neighboring country. They will have to stop at the border at some point in time if they continue to degrade their forests. So when a leader understands that land is an asset, then they will invest on it. Mm-hmm. They will not mine it because people are not managing their land, they are mining their land at the moment. Yeah. We are extracting the maximum that the land can produce, short-term view rather than a long-term perspective. And I would urge the business to really see this as an asset and invest, because they are very good at forward-looking and investing on long-term. But for now, they have been mining. I would urge them to manage and to really think about long-term.
So I love this idea of soil as an asset class.
I love it too. I think we've got this is the man from the CBOT originally. Come on, we're getting somewhere now. Okay, we've got our first solution here.
So we looked at this and we asked a really simple question: how our farmers really are managing that way. When they get paid for one harvest season, but they're making business decisions for 3, 4, 5 years. So if we think about how can we de-risk their investment and also plant it forward, literally, I will use that expression. But if we think about soil as a perpetual asset to society, then it would be no different than an airplane or a railway. And I want us to really think about the renewable energy sector. Back in 2007, they created stackable financial incentives to prop up and get the renewable energy sector moving. There's no reason why we cannot do that for agriculture, where we have renewable energy credits, we have carbon credits perhaps, we have the government that de-risk, and then actual financial mechanisms, new financial asset classes that actually support the farmers. So if I was investing my 401k back in 2007, I could support farmers.
Do you know, this is the beauty of a panel like this. I come in with 20 pages of notes kind of thing, and now we're just getting somewhere as well. Look, where's Jamie Dimon for this panel, Yeah, I'm sure you know Jamie, Dave, but this is the point, isn't it? If we can come up with have you seen the top drag in Davos, ladies and gentlemen? There's all stuff of NFTs and crypto, and if we can come up with these products that arguably don't necessarily have a fungible base to it, surely we can come up with a product that incentivizes quality of soil, the use of soil. I mean, I know we're talking a little bit in the abstract here now, Dave, but we don't have to be, do we?
No, we don't. And as I was saying, it's a financial shift, but it's also a cultural shift, and it's scary to take. I've been growing corn my whole career, or my grandparents and their grandparents have always grown corn, but now I'm going to try something different. And there's got to be not just an incentive, but some type of safety net. And Aaron, you talked about it in the financial system. I mean, there's a lot of components. It's got to be private sector, but I also think it's got to be, call it bank financing or traditional financing. But it's not a sexy asset class, and it's seen as high risk for traditional financing.
But how extraordinary! Right, the whole futures market started with agriculture in Amsterdam and Chicago 200 odd years ago. Maybe that's where futures came from. So we've come full circle with a stunningly complex suite of products, and all we're asking for is someone to value soil correctly, and yet we haven't got a financial product. I know I'm talking to the converted, but it's just suddenly hit me.
Well, I think that's one of the questions I have at Davos. I mean, if you look at ESG investment, and obviously we've heard some Twitters bashing on ESG. If you think about agriculture, a sector of people, an eco workforce, plus you look at the environmental net profit, net NPV, right? It pays it forward. The only product that can suck carbon out of the air, the only living machine, is some brown stuff and some green stuff, and the people who steward that. So could we look at the ESG investment, say 2% of all ESG investment is going to agriculture and forestry? Our only bet is renewable? Take a portfolio approach. We know we can draw down carbon if we start making little savings right now with our farmers and investing in them.
It's a tricky one. David?
I was going to follow that on, which is to say that agriculture and food, I've made the point, it's now coming into prominence, and rightly so. People are paying attention for reasons that we all understand. I'll get the statistic wrong, but you'll take my point, which is venture capital going into ag and food has tripled in the last 3 years.
Okay, so it is happening.
It is happening. And finally, it's to your point, Steve, NFTs and, healthcare, very needed areas in terms of healthcare. And, the sexy stuff. But all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, wait a minute. Food production and ag could benefit from it too. So, for example, I'll give you one example that I'm familiar with, which is a listening device that you connect to irrigation systems that can tell the saturation level of soil, so that it will then turn off the irrigation. Guess what? Saves water, and it's using technology, but we could have had that 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And so these are the kind of things that if more capital, traditional venture capital, growth capital, but also debt capital, to Aaron's good point, comes into this the world of food and ag, we're going to be better off.
So we're getting somewhere. So we're moving on to the investment side of things, the focus of things, the awareness that the team here at WEF are really pushing forward as well, and we thank you for that as well, and we thank you for this panel, by the way. I was going to do that at the end, but it's come up. And indeed now technology. But you've got a very important point to make.
My point was related to renewable energy that Aaron mentioned. You see, the peak in terms of investments on renewable energy came more or less at the same time as the world became extremely worried about air pollution. In China, in India, that's where the scale came from. And that's where, these are the two big markets that reduce the price of renewable energy, because it was not accessible, remember, just 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Now the world has reached a point where food and food systems are becoming a crisis. So I think the investments on food systems can only increase because we have no choice. Now, not only the supply chains are disrupted, but we know that if we do not pay attention to our food systems, it will affect our health.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So having nutritious food is extremely important. It's not only food, it's having healthy and nutritious food that will not affect your health. Anything that affects people's health, be it COVID or pollution or so forth, people are concerned about. So I think this is really a point that we should all, about supply chains and, having short circuits and making sure that farmers are well rewarded. They call it bio or whatever, but it has to be natural and reduce the processed food that we are eating, which is affecting our health.
So look, about a 7-minute warning, ladies and gentlemen. If you want to get a question in, have a think. I'm going to hog it for another few minutes. Well, this lady's definitely going to have... Do you know what? Why not? Did you have a question straight away? Why don't we get this... I'm probably in trouble with my host as well, but why not?
Thank you. Trish Malarkey from DSM, and I previously was head of R&D at Syngenta. I think it's really interesting listening to the conversation, and I hear you say that regenerative agriculture has been around for a long, long time. So there's something, and you mentioned culture. Maybe culture is one of the reasons that we don't use it, but it's not just about investment. I think it's about creating the demand for it. And I'm interested to know from the panel, how do you create the demand so that it's not capital, it's not venture capital that pays, but it's actually us, the customer, that pays? How do we really create the demand for the technology to be used?
Thank you very much indeed, and I've worked a lot with your company over the years, as I'm sure you're aware, with Feike and others as well, so absolutely know what you guys are doing in this field as well, and it's fantastic as well. This lady's got a question about, but does the panel want to answer? Does anyone particularly want to talk about how we create the demand for these products as well, for regenerative agriculture products? It seems a no-brainer to me because it's just a great product. Dave, did you want to pick up on this one?
Well, it was a little bit of what I was alluding to a few minutes ago when I said, when someone said reward the farmer for good behavior, I think we should reward the consumer with choices. And I think one of the challenges is not just regenerative ag, but with the entire food system, is traceability and transparency. If you think about the size, a soybean the size of your fingernail, and coming out of North America or Argentina, and how do you trace that back to the farm to say this was regeneratively produced or this was sustainably produced? We'll get there, and that's what I think venture capital and capital markets coming into ag will get us there. But I think my answer to your question, and it's a good question, is I'm not sure, but that's going to be the heart of it, because Cargill's customers are many CPG companies. And so we're all saying we can't do this alone, but we're talking to our many good CPG companies to say, help us get to your consumers, because when they demand it, when they say, I want this product, and I want to know it came from a regenerative farmer. And so, quick example, so we make turkeys. And you could scan a QR code on the turkey and see the story of the farmer. You should be able to do that. A QR code or a barcode, and say, okay, this farmer has been regeneratively producing for many years. I want to pay that premium. I've got kids, millennials and Zs, they will pay for it. They want to make their choices, and that's what we have to do, is demand-driven.
Right, okay. One question, because then we have got two more issues I need to really get into.
Absolutely, yeah. Just built on this conversation and David's previous comment, that it's not strange that now that the consumers need to pay more for good thing. It's going to be the other way around in case of carbon tax. That if we price the externalities something bad, then that the consumers actually our demands are kind of trying to stay away of that. Now, this conversation is basically telling us that we have to pay more for better thing, and I'm just trying to think that because we were in transition to appreciate those the value for nature, and if that once that the economic system changed and to price to appreciate those services, then that the things may be the other way around. I'm just trying to understand this parallel of carbon and actually natural service.
Erin, I think, do you want to pick up on this? Because I think, well, we all know we're all prepared to pay more for good quality food as well. But again, I guess the question is partly also, why should we pay more for something that's actually a better product as well, when it's more localized product in many ways as well? Maybe the supply chain is shorter as well.
I think this is the ultimate question, because asking this consumer to pay more, particularly with rising costs, and we see there's so much food insecurity going on, is that really the right thing? And I guess the question I'm asking the finance community, who is the consumer or customer? So to pay for this, is it just the consumer at the checkout and they want a high niche, very value-added product? That can easily happen. We see that happening all the time. Or are there pension funds that actually are willing to take a lower risk, lower return, because they have this ESG notion that they want to invest longer term in our farmers and soil as an asset class. So the customer might not just be the person at the checkout, is what I would get.
And Ibrahim as well, I mean, clearly part of the solution has to be the same as when I talked to Dr. Fatih Birol at the IEA about the solution is spending trillions on renewables. It has to be that the money has to be found from those big companies, from the pension funds themselves. It cannot just be from VC or just from the farmers trying to find the capital themselves, from banks.
The money is essentially from pension funds, and
right.
They have to make the right investments. I mean, the Paris Climate Agreement is very clear. Divest on pollution and harmful activities, and if you want to do business, be the first mover on conserving the planet and saving the planet. Now the question is, do I prefer to consume products that I know will have an impact on my health, and I will end up treating myself for this disease, or do I invest more on my lifestyle so as to have a healthier food? Maybe that discussion needs to happen individually, and the decision is basically having the transparency and the traceability that David mentioned. I am the consumer, I will make my choice, but I need to know what is it that I'm consuming.
Right. And we've jumped, actually, I was going to talk about transportation and processing, because that is all part of the food system. We spent most of our conversation rightly about how the food is produced, and the soil and the degradation, and what farmers can do and what big ag can do as well. But let's move to that consumer conversation just for one or two questions as well. I, as a consumer of food, have great amount of knowledge about this because I've read a lot about it as well. I cannot expect everyone to be as obsessed about knowing about what I eat as I am as well. It's not healthy being as obsessed about what I eat as I am, I can assure you. There's a juxtaposed idea there. So, but we do need, there is a responsibility for everyone, whether it's governments, we don't live in a nanny state, but we do want to know what we're eating and know those lifestyle choices we make. Because you just made a great point. It's not about living longer, it's about living healthier for longer as well. So, Erin, do you want to pick up on kind of education of consumers about what they're eating? And I know you represent Raj's former as well, but how much meat we're eating and what that's doing to our bodies and to the planet.
So I think the biggest thing when it comes to what we eat is to really know your farmer. That's like number one. With 2% of people growing food today, and then the rest, living in an urban environment, they often do not know what a plant or an animal even does or is looking like. And really get to know a farmer, follow them on Facebook, on Instagram, and ask questions.
But that's a luxury. There are large people, and look, for me, I live in an agricultural community. That's easy. That's easy. I can go and see my farmer. I can go to his or her farm shop as well. But for thousands and millions of people in metropolitan areas, they don't have that luxury, do they, Dave? I mean,
they don't. But I think what we need to do is provide choices. Yeah. And so there are those that live in the upper income brackets that have the luxury to understand education and have choices, have the luxury of having choices, or informed choices, I should say. But whether it's pea protein, animal protein, bug-based protein, insect-based protein, we've got to offer choices.
Because you make pea proteins that goes into Beyond Meat.
We do.
I knew that.
Yep.
Right.
So there's two well-known plant-based protein companies. One wants to see an end to the animal protein industry. Mm-hmm. The other wants to offer choices to animal protein. Mm. And so that's who are we the supplier to, as you might imagine.
Yeah.
And so give people choices, and you don't necessarily need to know all the statistics about, greenhouse gas emissions from animal protein versus pea protein, but you can make the decisions at the supermarket in addition to educating yourself online.
I'm very aware that I'm supposed to have 3 minutes left. I might squeeze 4 or 5. I'm like, but no more, absolutely no more. Otherwise, I'll get the evil stare from Weth. But what about the processing and the production? This should be the easy ground, shouldn't it? The transportation and the processing, the ability to lessen your carbon footprint, whether it be in shipping, whether it be in trucks, whether it be in the process, whether it be in the amount of labour. I know you've done a load of work on this as well, but why don't we start off with Ibrahim as well, because I don't just want to make this about what you're doing and what others are doing as well. So they're the easy miles, aren't they?
Steve, since you are running out of time, I don't want to finish this conversation without mentioning, we spoke a lot about food, but actually it's animal feed and fiber, cotton. The clothes that we wear, they are all having an impact on our land. And when we talk about really land degradation, it's the production systems and the consumption systems. Think about moving to a circular economy where the fiber that you are wearing today can be put back on the cycle and not thrown away, because it's land. Your T-shirt is land and water and carbon. So know what you are going to wear, know how long you want to wear it, and put it back to the market, and don't throw it away. By doing so, you are actually saving the planet. So it's not only food waste, it's also fiber waste.
Yeah. Erin, you've already said no, your farmer. I know you must be in favour of localisation and shorter supply chains as well, but for those people who can't have those short supply chains, what are the answers?
I mean, what grows together goes together. So I think partly, when people look at the United States, we have the rangelands. That's how we grew up, right? And so it's those rangelands where cows are on. Those are marginal lands. And also grain markets. The United States does have an amazing acreage. And so that acreage is used for export. So I think, really even know the place of space. If I was in France right now, they know exactly where their food's coming from. But also, if you're looking at even at an export market, if it's coming from the United States, that those farmers have put forth incredible amount of work.
I thought about veganism a few years ago, but the French killed me with that cheese. And
I know.
I failed. I nearly got there, but I failed because the French...
540 different types.
Oh, they got hundreds. I think there was a political comment about that once as well. But how do you govern a country with 500 cheese or something? But I butchered that one as well. This is where cargo's doing a lot of work, isn't it? The processes, the transportation.
Yes, it is. For example, we're a large charterer of dry freight around the world. We don't own ships, but at any point in time, we have 600 ships on the world's oceans with some of our products on it. So renewable fuels for our ship owners. We are also investing in sail technology, which can reduce fuel oil usage on ships, the same sail technology that is used on racing yachts in America's Cup. But it's all part of a very complicated supply chain. People don't think about, how did my food get here? You're right. It's great to have local, but it's for the most part, it's got to get on ocean-borne transportation, and that's got to be sustainable too.
Right, I'll do one final quick question for everyone as well. I've had the nod, I'm okay. Ibrahim as well. Okay, so you've had your report. It was not alarmist. It was alarming as well. Are you optimistic that the message is getting out there and actually forums like this are pushing it enough? The fact that this is being discussed in Davos is very encouraging to me.
The fact that the public is talking about it, just to give you an idea, we just finished our COP. It is not one of the most famous COPs because compared to climate or biodiversity, but we had 5,000 articles.
Wow.
From the press. There is a huge interest on food and land because it's the future. Because the food that we are eating today, we are borrowing from our children. We should really be aware of that because we are destroying the land at a space that is not sustainable anymore. So I think what makes me really encouraged is to see the young people that came to Abidjan, where we had our COP, that really said, we want to change this.
Yeah.
This is not sustainable.
Yeah, this isn't a light conversation, but young people, what is this avocado and toast thing? I'm not there. Erin, I know where you're coming from, but just put it in a nutshell for us.
I mean, I think you hit it nail on the head. We are Tuesday at Davos, right? And we're the 6-month mark to COP27. And we have to use these next 2 days to figure out new economic solutions for our farmers. Our fields do not wait. It is springtime. We're seeing what's going on with the food crisis. This is a different moment, and we have got to show up to COP27 with real financial commitment. We can start now thinking about new solutions. But our farmers need to have mechanisms to de-risk and have new forms of investment, because doubling down on them is really investing in eco-workforce right now that can be deployed in the fight on climate change. And they have the capabilities. We've got the technology. We just got to make sure that they can finance and get it moving now.
Dave, we've had a great conversation, but I'm going to go back to where I started. Cargill's is very, very important in this area. I won't use the P word I used earlier. It is very, very important in this area as well. Are you willing, as a private company, to take on the mantle of getting the exposure of this issue to the same kind of level that energy has in the whole renewables area, in the whole net zero area? Can Cargill's take the lead?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the reasons that we're here, and it's one of the reasons we're doing all the things that we've talked about today. And I think, there are chat rooms around the world that make fun of Davos. I think, it's only been 2 days, but as I said, spent more time talking about ag, the farmer, food production, supply chain, food crises, the looming hunger crisis. It's already here. That will be exacerbated if we've got a couple bad harvests, and it has already been exacerbated. But these are the kind of conversations that change the world. That's why I'm here. And yes, Cargill will be a leader in this.
I just want to say then, so let's find the money, let's make pension funds more aware of the investment, let's look at regenerative agriculture, let's get the word out there. Everyone who's in this room here knows how important it is. It's the lot that are out there potentially who don't necessarily know as well. Look at the ESG investment side of it. Look at the technology solutions, the things that can put in the ground about irrigation. They blow your mind, this kind of stuff as well. It's about how we eat as well. Let's not forget it's a system. It's not just about the farmers, but the farmers have to be involved as well. Can I just say thank you? And I know she won't want me to, but thank you to Tanya for leading this one as well, because we all think it's important and you're doing some great work on it. So thank you very much indeed, Wef. Thank you, Tanya.
Nicely done.